Debate rural economy. Lord Fuller.
I spent yesterday standing in a field in that new spiritual home of British agriculture at Diddley Squat Farm in Oxfordshire for the cereals trade show. Nearly 20,000 farmers, growers, advisors, machinery dealers, drone flyers, and yes, by way of declaration of interest, fertiliser suppliers like myself, huddled under umbrellas, wearing Wellingtons, talking trade. The host, Jeremy Harkson, has said that if there can't be a single farmer left who supports this government, and I can tell noble lords that my experience yesterday proves him to be correct. Now, indifference from a North London-based Labour Party sadly has morphed into a hatred of those who live in the Shires, those who put bread on the table and sustain our nation, with no signs of contrition in the gracious speech. You know the malevolence has reached an apogee when even the former Secretary of State for Health and the current Mayor of Manchester have realised this ritual rural abuse must stop. It's taken a while, but those two honourable gentlemen have worked out for themselves that Labour's war on the countryside has gone too far and must be halted. And it's because the food, drink and agriculture business is big. Agriculture's annual contribution to the UK economy is £13.9 billion a year. But this isn't a debate about farming alone. The debate is wider than that. This debate seeks to hold the government to account for the damage they have wrought on those who live in the sticks, the places where the Uber can't come and collect you from the pub at 11 p.m. because either the pub has closed down as a result of Labour's war on the high street in our market towns, villages and coastal communities, or because there isn't an Uber in the countryside anyway. You see, we do different out in the sticks. But it's not just rural pubs. It's been terminal for country house hotels and other hospitality businesses, filleted by extra rates, hobbled by new employment taxes, and made unviable with other levies, fees and charges, like the tax on glass bottles. And it's not just hotels, private schools. Many custodians of wonderful Grade 1 heritage buildings are the largest employers where they have made country towns factory towns. Places like Holt, Marlborough, Oakham and Uppingham, mostly charities, they are significant contributors to the UK exports for services. But the government is deaf to that reality. In these places, they are the factories employing hundreds. The people who work there, cooks, cleaners, groundsmen and yes, teachers, aren't rich, but they've been the collateral damage in a class war that has seen them lose their jobs in areas with so few other opportunities. So much for the party supporting the workers. But we've seen £110 million slashed from rural councils with the abolition of the Rural Services Delivery Grant. Devon lost 10 million out of 100, Norfolk's not far behind, and North Yorkshire, our largest rural county, has lost over £12 million, with the countryside being shortchanged. Support for off-grid homeowners, off the beaten track, people who heat their homes with oil, has been nothing but an inadequate afterthought. And now we see a fresh war on country pursuits, which employ thousands, enhance conservation and dispose of fallen stock whilst keeping the country pub going in the winter. But not with fallen stock, I hasten to add. On Tuesday, the noble Lord Gummer raised the inexplicable behaviours by His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, who refused to refund millions in VAT incorrectly levied on county show societies that could force their insolvency. So we see that political indifference is now infecting the behaviours of the departments of state, damaging the cultural life of the countryside. And now let's dwell on the harm inflicted on farmers, which structurally undermines our food security as the result of the sustained attack on those who feed us. Last summer, there was a ham-fisted cessation of SFI, which could have helped the natural world. What irony that it's led to farmers intensifying production instead. We saw the cancellation of slurry lagoon grants that more than anything could have helped reduce river pollution. And we've empowered private equity and sovereign wealth funds to compulsorily purchase land for other purposes. All of these have shot the environment in the foot, an activity that will only be possible until shooting itself, of course, is sidelined. But thinking of the rural economy more widely, let's consider the inheritance taxes levied on farmers and other family businesses, disproportionately clustered around our market towns in modest trading estates. Together they employ millions in firms handed down in trust for the next generation. But they're being systematically filleted and starved of working capital in a way that foreign owners, private equity or publicly traded shares held by pension funds, are excused. This spiteful apartheid disproportionately affects firms in the provinces, especially the large number of rural trades involved in food processing, machinery dealing, fencing, ditch digging, plant hire, and any other of ancillary trades like timber and buildings merchants and the haulage contractors that fetch and carry supplies. So we see that Labour's economic illiteracy is chilling the private investment that drives growth, reducing profits today, damaging the corporation tax revenues of tomorrow, all of which pay for schools and hospitals. We have a Chancellor boasting about free bus travel for youngsters in August. If only there were the buses in the countryside for them to ride. Instead, those who drive those twin cab trucks, who know how to get up in the morning, are to be taxed more heavily, and all these people need to move about anyway because of poor digital connectivity in our villages. The Treasury boasts they've taken about threepence off the price of a litre of red diesel, but only till Christmas. It's government reduced to gimmickry. And all these active harms visited on the rural economy are as a result of the smug city dweller who finds the countryside to be somewhere rather to look down on and patronise. It's all rather provincial, you see, and that is part of the problem, because this government misunderstands, underappreciates and maligns the countryside. They should stop treating us as second-class citizens. Because like the hopeless apprentice, Labour isn't learning on the job. There are other insults in the pipeline. Labour has increased house building targets by over 50% in rural districts to unachievable levels, levels that have never been achieved before, to mask the manifest failure of house building in the cities. The social housing bill does nothing to promote exceptions social housing in rural areas, the sort championed by the noble Lord Cameron of Dillington. Under the land use framework, fully 1.7 million hectares of productive farmland, about 20%, will be removed from agriculture. At a typical £2,000 gross income per hectare, it represents a £3.4 billion annual hit to the rural economy in a sector that it is estimated lost £800 million last year. The countryside is being made poorer, and if it carries on at this rate, there will be no money left to make it even more attractive to the birds and the bees and the other species. New SFI is meant to be more environmentally beneficial with fewer actions, but with a paltry £240 million budget announced today and capping, it stops those with the most land from making the greatest environmental impact. Worse, at a time when there is hunger and a need for food security, there's a plan to introduce insane carbon taxes on fertiliser, the farmer's largest expense. It'll do nothing to reduce emissions, yet will turbocharge food price inflation at a moment when the EU is racing to reduce the impact. Why are we running towards this danger with a scheme that is architecturally incompatible with the EU one and with additional complications, with free allowances, default values and so forth? For a country that doesn't produce ammonia anymore, the raw ingredient for fertiliser, foreign suppliers are already concluding, and I know this from personal experience, that we are just becoming far too difficult to deal with. That imperils our food security because fertiliser forms the foundation of our food chain. And here's the rub. And now there's the problematic SPS deal that will turn back the clock on precision breeding that drives sustainability, productivity, and will ban advances and innovations in food, in blackgrass chemistry. So here's the rub. Labour is trying to have it both ways on the SPS, dynamic alignment with the EU, but without the agricultural support that the EU policies require. It leaves British farmers in a worst of all worlds situation, all the costs and none of the revenue. The EU has seen us coming, something the government can't see for itself. And they will not rest until our best land is given up for solar schemes that destabilise the grid and generate no real income at all. So there's no need for the little doers that keep the village stalls going. And to prove this point, yesterday we learned that Clarkson's farm employs 150 people. Converted to solar, it would employ nobody. Labour's vandalism even goes as far as imposing metropolitan patterns on local councils, extending regional city councils to milk the surrounding parishes to pay off their historic debts. It's all quite a list. But today I can reveal for the first time another example of this government's indifference to the rural economy. In reopening the Ensus plant to produce CO2 for our nation at a subsidy cost of £1 million a day, I can reveal that the first cargoes of feedstock to power it were from France. The government couldn't bring itself to condition that the wheat for that plant came from British farmers who are on their knees. Given a free choice, this government has subsidised French farmers to the extent of £1 million a day over our own. And the irony is, none of this would have been necessary had an unthinking government not signed away our 1.4 billion litre a year bioethanol business in a trade deal with the US that captured collapsed grain prices on our shores. So this debate reveals a landscape where there is no one in government who understands or is prepared to stand up and speak for those who can see green outside their windows, just chaotic departments all pulling in different directions. We have a government that prefers dogma to delivery and is ignorant of the millions who live and work in the sticks, working long hours out in the rain and the cold, boosting nature, cherishing our countryside, tending to our herds and crops and making Britain a green and pleasant land. Labour has simply abandoned the countryside with nothing in the great gracious speech. It is an omission that will come back to bite them. My Lords, it's been a very interesting debate and I'm grateful for all noble lords who have contributed to it. I think it was a good job that the speaking allocation was increased by 25% because so many people had so much to say. It was a pleasure, of course, to see Lord Rober back in his seat, back in harness, so to speak, fighting the good fight. My Lords, I think the government has painted itself into a corner on the countryside, but I do congratulate the Baroness Royal, for her spirited defence of it. But she does invite me to make a further declaration of interest because I am a long-standing and lately long-suffering shareholder of Adnams, the brewery at Southold, but their beers are still as good as ever, even though their shares aren't quite as plump. Now, there were so many different combinations to the bill. We had seasonal agricultural workers, education, the rural crime raised by my noble friend Lord Howard of Castleacre. We had the tension between alignment and mutual recognition. And I think that's something we'll return to in future weeks, tourism and hospitality. The greatest pleasure I took from the debate was that Baroness Pithkeatley raised flooding before my noble friend Baroness Mackintosh, and then the greatest surprise was that Baroness Mackintosh didn't mention it because it is a hobby horse of hers. Yes, we covered housing and transport from potholes to mopeds. I was very taken with the comments from my noble friend Baroness Coffey, who echoed a previous Secretary of State for Agriculture, probably Maff at that time of day, where she made the important contribution that people in the countryside aren't rich, but there is poverty. And because the poverty is diffuse, it can't obviously be seen. It doesn't hide the fact that there's poverty nonetheless. Harder to see, but more difficult to deal with. And I don't think that's always been grasped by urban politicians who can see it right before their eyes. Yes, we've seen the interplay between business, councils, investment, and the APR point. Let's not relitigate that. Safe to say that I think it particularly benights agricultural businesses because it includes the value of machinery, livestock, and cultivation's work in progress, for example, in a way that doesn't otherwise happen. Look, to summarise, I do think we have shown today that the countryside has an empathy. There's a love of landscape. There's the commitment to service that Baroness Pithkeatley raised. There's the importance of hard work. And the people in the countryside don't want to be classed as second-class citizens because they love our green and pleasant land. I beg to leave.
The question is that this motion be agreed to. As members of that opinion will say content. The contrary not content. The contents have it.